let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. Happy Tuesday to all of you. My name is Elahe, and I'm part of the team here at iFormBuilder. And I'm so excited for today's webinar on the essentials for project managers. I think it's just going to be a really great webinar that'll help us, learn how to do our jobs better. Everything from managing users to forms and everything in between, and really making all of your projects dance. So with that, I will turn it over to Barrett.
Hi, Elahe. Thank you so much for that introduction. And like Elahe stressed, we are super excited for today's webinar. So for today's topics, we're going to focus on the steps needed to simplify account management, how to increase productivity in iFormBuilder projects, how to make changes to a live form without losing data, and how to get the most out of the data captured. So the first thing here, and I'm just going to make my screen a little bit larger, is how to simplify account management. So we're going to walk through all of this today. And what we're going to be doing is really at a high level, we're going to be breaking it down and saying, are you aware of these steps that should be taken place to simplify and make your life easier? There's actually 5 different aspects of this account management. There's managing the users, managing your forms, which managing your forms is not just assigning the forms, but also creating the forms. Managing your data, so exporting your data and doing the data cleansing, and devices. So how are you managing your devices? Are your users using their personal devices, or are they using company-wide devices, and what ones? And how do you effectively help them and educate them on using the iForm app with those devices? And then the last part of this account management is the profile itself. So when you log into your iFormBuilder account, you are in a profile, so what we call a company profile. So how do you edit that profile to become more effective and to have the results that you hope for within your account management? So to start, we're going to go into that company profile management. And the first step that I have here in this list of things to do is make sure whenever you are in your profile that you've updated the company info to include the accurate time zone that you're in. That's a huge important issue as far as when you are collecting data, what time zone is being represented as well, in the metadata, that is. If you are using using one of our widgets, our time widget or our datetime widget, then that will represent the time zone that user is in when they're capturing it. So this updating the company info to include that time zone is for the metadata that you're capturing. The second thing that I want to point out to you to do with the account management is to make sure that you are aware, or if you choose to use our media storage, to set up a stored path for the images that are coming in to your iFormBuilder project. So when your users are capturing a picture while they're in the field, where do you want that photo to be stored? Do you want it to be stored in the iFormBuilder cloud, which is the default method, or would you like it to be stored in a Dropbox account or a Box account? Or do you prefer that you use our secure media storage location as well? So there are a couple things to consider with this. And I think some people are fine with the default method and not using any of these media storage and storage paths, but it is available to you, and that may make your life a little bit easier. The other thing to improve your company profile management is to customize the PDF and the HTML reports available to you if you are going to be allowing access to those reports. That way you don't have to worry about branding them, and once an email is set up, if you are using the email alert, then it'll have your own logo on it and will look the way that you want it to. So just to quickly show you where this customization takes place and how to simplify your life with this account management, I'm just going to log into my dedicated database. And this is the company profile that I'm in. So all my users will have the same profile number. I'm going to go under the company tab, and that's where I see company info. Once in company info, this is where I need to make sure this time zone is representative of where I am and where I want the metadata time and timestamp to actually be created from. If you need to edit that, all you do is press the Edit Company Info button. The email customization and the PDF report customization are right underneath that. It's a very easy process to add your own logos. And then I mentioned the media configuration, and this is where you'd go and edit that media configuration and choose if you want to have a storage path. So I've linked up my Dropbox account, that, as you can see here. Now, what I've set it up for is so that I can bring images stored in my Dropbox. Maybe I have my logos, and I want those logos to be a part of my forms, or I want to add some images to my option list. So I've connected my Dropbox account to allow for that to occur. If I want to also have it as my media storage, so like I mentioned earlier, every time an image is taken from a user, I want that image to be placed in a specific folder in my Dropbox account. So that's what I can set up here. I can set up my storage structure. I maybe want that storage structure to go by the path and then the file name, or do I want it path, profile ID, form name, and then file name. Once I set that up, all I do is hit save, and then I'll have all those images in one location. The next thing that I want to mention then is that how to simplify the account management. And this is almost like a step-by-step process that you want to, or a checklist that you want to make sure that you do before you're deploying your projects. And you want to instruct your users on the iForm app. So you want to make sure that they're aware of which iForm app to download. So if you're not aware, we actually have 3 different apps. We have iForm, iForm ES, and iForm Kiosk. iForm ES is extra security. So if you have a project, maybe you're doing a HIPAA compliant project, then you need to make sure that you are using our iForm ES so that it has that extra device security. So make sure your users are aware of which one of those apps they should download for their projects. The next thing is that you'll want to make sure that they know how to update their app preferences and the settings. This is especially important if you are using a dedicated database and the user is going to have to change the server URL. So it's important that they know how to do that, as well as it can be very beneficial that they know that information if they need to troubleshoot on their device. So maybe they're having some issues with the syncing, and so maybe they need to turn off sync on start. So they need to know how and where that option is located. The other thing about this is whenever you assign a new form, if there's like an image widget and you hadn't had that, or the user hadn't had a form with that widget in it yet, they're going to be prompted if they want to allow access to their camera through their device. If they say no, then of course at that point they won't be able to capture any images, which will impact their data collection. So they may need to go and change that setting or change that preference at a later date, and that's where they'll need to know how to do that as well. The next thing that they should know is how to log in and how to log out of the iForm app. This is especially important if your users are going to be changing devices on a daily basis. And the reason for that, and we're going to go in a little bit more detail in just a little bit, but when a user logs into the iForm app, then that device is now capturing one of their username licenses. Each user can log into up to 3 different devices at a given time. Now that's great, but when the user tries to log into that 4th device, they'll receive an error saying maximum number of licenses reached, contact the company admin. So to avoid having your users contacting you to manually free up their licenses, if you instruct them on how to log in and how to log out, every time they log out of a device, it'll free up their license back to the cloud to be available for them to log into another device. Another really simple thing to instruct your users on is how to delete. Maybe they are, or maybe even yourself, you're creating a record in iForm, just testing something out, but you don't actually want to keep that on your device. You're just doing some quick dummy data. You need to make sure that your users are aware of just how to delete it by holding, like putting their finger down and holding on to that record. And at that point, once they've tapped and held that record, then they'll see the delete option. Another way is just to instruct them on how to sync the devices to the cloud. So whether you're using an iOS or an Android device, that does differ slightly. With the iOS devices, we get in the habit of just pulling down and that refreshes the window, and that's how your device will be synced. With the Android client, you have the refresh button at the top right corner. So making sure that they're aware of that. Also, if they've changed the settings or you have had it so that the settings say that the device will not sync on start and it won't, and you don't want it to sync on complete or sync on submit, then you'll have to instruct your users on how to manually sync once they have access to Wi-Fi, which is that pull down method or the refresh button on the Android devices. The other piece here is make sure that they're aware of the record status icons. So here are the different app preferences that are available to your users. If you look at my screenshot on the left-hand side for the iOS devices, you'll notice I have permissions for the photos, the microphone, and the camera. If you look at your device and you don't see microphone, that may be because you haven't had a form with the sound widget included. And so this is where it'll only show what widgets you have in your form for the different permissions you've given here. Like I mentioned, you need to instruct your users on how to log out of their device. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier that's important to understand that is if I've logged into my device and maybe I am taking a lunch break and Elahe wants to use my iPad to go some other location and collect some data, I don't need to log out for her to be able to use that iPad. All she would have to do is remove where it had my username and remove where it had my password and put her own information in. If that were to happen that way, then the device would be holding on to a device license username for me as well as for Elahe. So your device could be holding on to multiple user licenses, and that's important to understand too. It's important to know that the only way to free up a device license from the device is by tapping the log out button. Like I mentioned, it's important for the users to understand the record status icons. This is especially important for those users who are in areas where they may not have good connectivity. And it's important for them to see these so that they know, or be aware of these so that they know when they've had a successful sync to the cloud and when the records are still just being hosted on the device. Next, we're going to go into the user management. So right now, just to reiterate what we've talked about company management, and now we're going into, company management, device management, and now we're going into user management. The first thing here with the user management is I want to make sure that you're aware that you can send your users notification. You also should make sure your users are aware about this license model that I keep mentioning, as well as advising users on the device password security. So how to avoid being locked out of the iFormBuilder system and almost put in a workflow in place if your user does become locked out. The last thing is to improve user management by creating user groups. So just before we go into these steps, I want to make sure you're aware of where the area is that I'm talking about for this user management. So if you log into your iFormBuilder and you go under the Users tab, you're going to see Notifications, Add Edit Users, My Profile, as well as User Group. So where you see my profile, this is where the user is able to change their password if they need to. So let's go back into our slide deck here. And here's this license model again. So to actually look into this license model, I know what we're talking about here is our users and making sure that they're aware of these. But if I need to manually assist my users by logging them out of the iForm app, then I need to actually go under the company tab and go to where it says license. Once I go under that tab, I'm going to see how many licenses that specific user has active. So you can see right now this user has 3 device licenses captured. If they are trying to log into the 4th device and they don't have one of the other devices available for them to log out of, you'd select that username and then click delete. Upon doing that, that's actually going to free up all the user's licenses so that at that point they can log into 3 devices again. If they were to go back to one of those other devices, maybe they didn't have time to sync to the cloud and they had data still stored on that device, do not fret. They would still be able to get that data and they'd be able to sync that to the cloud. So all they would have to do is log back into that device. The next thing here is just about the adding and editing users. And that's under the user tab where it says add edit users. So just some points here is to make sure, number 1, that you use the correct email address when you're creating a new user. Also, the reason for that being is if the user needs to reset their password, then they'll need to receive an email to have that information. So that should be their personal or their company-wide email address. If you are working on a project where individuals don't have a unique email address, then make sure that you place in your email address so that you can assist them with resetting that password. The next thing that I want to point out is when you look at the requirements for the user details that we ask of you, we only actually force you to place in the username, an email address, and the password. But I would recommend using the first name and last name as well, because with that you're able to use our built-in functions. So our iFormBuilder built-in functions, which can pre-populate formed fields, which is really, really powerful as well. What you want to keep in mind, though, is that is case sensitive. So if you create a username that is all lowercase, make sure your users are also logging in with all lowercase so that those built-in functions work properly. Another thing that I want to point out here is if a user were to log in with the incorrect password over 11 times, then going to the add and edit users location is how you would unlock that username. Oops, I went a little too fast here, so let me just go back. Okay, so when we're creating a new user, you have 3 different permissions that you can give a user. You have the right to create forms, the admin, and the right to sync to the Thunderplug. When you have a user who's just collecting data, so you just want them using their devices out in the field, then you don't have to give any of these permissions. When you want a user to create forms, but you only want them to be able to see the forms that they create, then you're going to tick off the box that says right to create forms. And at that point, they won't see any other forms in their profile that anyone else has created. They'll only see the ones they've done. If you tick off just the box that says admin, then they'll be able to do everything in that account except for build forms. If you check off both right to create forms and admin, that's what we call like a super admin or super company admin, because they'll be able to do all the administrative work. They'll also be able to create forms and see all the other forms in their account that were created in the account. So not just the ones that they've done. What I've done here is I've kind of just drafted out what those permissions are. So if you want to review them later time when I share this with you. The other thing is that you see here is kind of what they will see when they log in. So if you've created a user who's an end user who's just collecting data, when they log into the web portal, They'll see the Data tab, the Users tab, and Support. And only under Users will they see My Profile in case they need to update their user information.
Hey, Barrett.
Yep.
We have a couple questions on users.
Sure.
So one of them is, so when someone hit delete on the license page, and there was a message box that warned that they wouldn't be able to delete the user again for 30 days. Can you just clarify what it means and why the restriction is there?
Great, and thank you for whoever pointed that out. I should have mentioned this, but with that warning message, what it's saying is that if you decide that you do want to delete that username, that for another 30 days, you won't be able to go in and delete that username again, or that license. I'm sorry, very different. Username and licenses are very different. So, so deleting those licenses for that specific username will free it up. Now, the reason we put in that limitation for not giving you the ability to come back in there and delete that license again is because we want your users to be held accountable for their data collection process. It's also a way for us to make sure that one username isn't trying to you're not trying to have maybe 20 different people using that one username and logging into 20 different devices. So that's why we've put this limitation in here, and we don't allow you to come in every 30 days to delete that. Hopefully that is a little bit clearer. Were there any other questions?
Yep, there's one more. So when you create a new user, are those details automatically sent to the user, or does the system admin have to give those credentials and notify the user?
Wonderful question as well. So when you create that user, the user is not going to be made aware that they now have a username in the account. So you will have to contact them to let them know. One thing that some groups have done is they've created a very generic password for their users, and what they force them to do is they force them to log into their iFormBuilder account and go into My Profile and update their password that day for the security reasons and for just making sure that they have now become familiar with using iFormBuilder.
Awesome, thank you. That's it for now.
All right, thank you, Elahe. And great questions, everyone. Keep them coming. The next thing that I have listed here is how to unlock your username. So like I mentioned, it's very important that you instruct your users that they could potentially be locked out of the iFormBuilder application and the web portal. This happens when they use the incorrect password on their device over 11 times. Now, you as a company admin, what you'll have to do to assist them is you'll have to log into your account. And once you log into your account, you'll go under the Add and Edit User section. Once you're in there, you'll see a section or a row that says Status. And in this screenshot, you see that the status is that red icon. So that's right there symbolizing that the user has been locked out of the system. If you look under Status and they have a green check mark, then they are in healthy status. So once they have this red icon, what you'll have to do is you'll have to select that row for that username, and then once you do that, an unlock button will appear. You'll unlock that username, and then you'll want to change that password so that they can then log in with the correct password and continue with their data collection. And the next step that I want to talk to you about with managing your users is creating a user group. So a user group can be so powerful and save you so much time, as well as cut down on some of the human error that you may have when you're quickly creating when you're quickly assigning users to forms. So the user groups allows you to clump group users into a group, and with this, every time you assign that user group to a form, all of those users will come with it. What I really suggest doing here is creating a group that starts with the text group at the start of the name, because when you are going in and assigning your user group's going to be located in the same area as each individual user, so it's much easier to find that user or user group if that name if the name starts with a group. So let me go ahead and kind of just show you an example of what that looks like. So I've already created a user group. And now what I want to do is I want to assign a form to that user group. So I select one of the forms that I have here, and I click Assign. Once in there, you'll notice I have one individual user, which just says Tray Insert, and I have two groups for that naming convention that I mentioned. So let's say I have 5 different individuals for this group. If I want all 5 of those individuals to be able to collect data, then I'd tick off that box. But maybe one of those users, I also want to give access to view that data, so view all the record data that was captured. For that individual user, I would tick off view. I don't have to tick off the view for that whole group. Again, you can see where having a naming convention for your groups makes it much easier to find when you are assigning a user or a user group. So the next step here is to go through how to do the account management of the forms. So not only is it, again, creating the forms themselves, but you can create form groups. You can use post data URLs. You can use email alerts so that every time a record is submitted on a specific form, an email is sent to an individual or individuals. You also are able to set up language localization. So if your project is going through different continents or different areas of the world and you want to have the same form be used, but you want it to be set to the local language, you can do that with our language localization aspect of forms. We also allow you to do scoring. So this can be very powerful and save you a lot of time if you're trying to do a quick inspection where a user may pass and fail. By using our option list, you can score the results in a report without you having to do anything in the form itself. It's also important to understand some of our form building standards and best practices. Before I go on, Elahe, are there any questions?
Yep, we have one. So with the form assignment, can people that are given both collection and view capabilities and view rights under form assignment, are they able to edit records on the web, via the web?
If they're given view rights for that, yes, they are.
And then is it limited? Can it be limited in any way? Are there any restrictions that the admin can put on there?
For the data, is what I'm guessing. And unfortunately, no. If you're going to give view rights for data, then the user is going to be able to view all of the record data that was captured for that specific form. So not just what they have collected, but everybody in that company profile who's using that form, you'll be able to view that data. What you
And
can,
then, I was just saying, can they edit the records from other ones?
Yes, they would be able to. So what you can do instead, if you want to limit what your users are having access to and being able to view, if you want them to only view the records that they've captured, you may want to consider having it so that once the user has synced their device, that they keep the records on their device so that they can review it on a daily basis. That way it's still going to be under the forms section when in their data collection section, but they would be able to view the records that they have captured. Another thing that people have done is they use our email widget, and they allow the user to place in their email address, so then they can receive the HTML version of the report that they have submitted.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. So we just talked about creating a user group. You can also create a form group. And a form group works the same way, and it allows you to clump forms together that are going together for maybe a specific project. That way, again, you can save time and cut down on how many forms you have to go into and select your users to be assigned to. But what I want to point out here is just, again, I want to reiterate that the collect is the users that can collect on the iForm app, as well as completing a record in that data views if they have collect rights. With View, they're also able to view all of the data, and they're not only can they view the data on the web portal, but if they are using an iPad, they can also view that data in the Manage tab of the iPad. So one way to simplify this account management again is through that email alert. So once you've selected a form, and let me go back in here actually. So we've already selected a form that we want to assign. Underneath where we have our individual users and our user groups, we have a section that says email alert. So I can add an email address. Maybe I want to always receive an HTML version of this report once it's been submitted. So I put my own email address here. I can do multiple email addresses by just separating by a comma. I can do CCs and BCCs as well. But like I mentioned earlier, another way to have an email sent is by using the email widget within iForm. And this is just a quick example at the bottom of what an HTML report would look like. I've customized that color scheme and I put my own logo on it. And so that's what it can be done under the company section within iFormBuilder. Another thing to help you and assist you with this account management is to use the post data URL for forms. So this is just a quick screenshot of what it can look like. But what you're able to do is you're able to create a connection from your iFormBuilder account to another web service. So maybe you're using another dashboard tool, or you're using another PDF generator, whatever it may be. You can create a connection so that every time a record is submitted for this specific form, it'll be posted to this other web service automatically, and it'll be updated in real time. And that's using our post data URL. I've put out some of the information here for you to look at later if you want to, but of course we also have that on our help desk. We've talked about using the localization. Just a quick thing to point out here is that if you do add an additional language to one of your forms, once that data hits the server, it'll automatically be transitioned into English for the option list, not the free text, but all the option lists. So this way, if you do have a form in 5 different languages and you're not fluent in all 5 of those languages, you can still see the results, see it all in English in real time, so to have some consistency and to make sure that the responses are all coming together the same. The next thing is just, like I mentioned, with the reports, you're able to add a weight to the questions and the responses. And in this little screenshot, you can see that when I look at that report, that specific report got a 50 out of 60. So you're able to add different percentages. You can change those percentages, and that change will be reflected in all the data that was previously captured. Another way to simplify account management, and this is actually one of our newest features within FormBuilder, is creating a form package and importing a form package as well. So if you have a dedicated database, then you're able to, creating a form package is a quick, easy way to take numerous forms together and download a file and then import that file within another account. If you don't have a dedicated database, whatever I just described goes the same way. Maybe you have another group within your company that's trying to see if FormBuilder is right for them, and they've signed up for a free account. You can give them, or you can build a package of forms for them, and you can instruct them on how to import that package so that they can start testing those forms and seeing if FormBuilder is right for them. Another thing that's great about this package builder is it allows you to create a form package, and if you want, just create a folder on your computer create a folder on your computer to store these different packages. And so you then have a backup of the forms before you make any changes. This is really helpful too, is if you have a lot of people working on forms and some people are new to form building, you're able to take a backup of that package and backup of those forms before they make any changes. So you're able to eliminate any error, or if they do cause problems, you're able to then just import the original form and have that be used again. If you're learning, again, if you want to learn more about this, I have included the link on this page, so that'll give you all the how-tos on the form packager. The next thing that is super, super important when you're simplifying your account management is to set standards for your best form results. So the first one here is to try to create or find a form builder champion. So that one person who really loves to actually form build. And this could surprise you with who this person is. You may not know that this person has any interest in it, but the second they start building forms, they just fall in love with the platform. Those individuals usually then like to learn more about JavaScript so that they can use our smart controls. Our smart controls are a way to cut down on data entry and human error, and that's a way to also cut down on that data cleansing that you may find yourself faced with if you don't have all the smart controls or if you're not using option lists and whatnot. So that's really, really important too. The next thing is to make sure that all your users are aware of our form building golden rules and that they're aware on how to follow those so that there aren't times where you lose data because they weren't aware of that. And then I also have listed here to use naming conventions. And now we're going to go into that. But before I do, Elahe, are there any questions?
Yep, we have one about creating forms and how, I guess, editing works. Can two admins work on one form at the same time, or can they work on it, is it one at a time?
So two people could be logged in to the same form. And unfortunately, if that were to be the case, what would happen is whoever hit the save button last, that would be the version of the form that's being saved. So my suggestion to you would be to try to only have one person logged in editing that form at a time. Now, I know that's hard to do because you may not have communication on that very often. So what you could do instead is you could create a duplicate of that form and make all the changes to your duplicate and then check to see if they're working on it, or just kind of setting up a structure saying, okay, you work on it from 5 to 6 and I'll work on it from 6 to 7 type of thing. Elahe, was there another question?
Can you import forms from an external form like XLS or something like that?
That is a great question. That's where we're heading with this package import. So we're currently in that first stage with the package builder and the package import. And right now, all you can import is the JSON file that you create within Form Builder. Down the road, though, we are planning on having it so that you can take an Excel file and import that into Form Builder and then make changes as needed. Anything else?
And then going back to the one about the multiple users and the forms, if two users have the ability to edit the form, is there any notification that can be set up to say this person's working on it right now?
That is not currently in the platform, but that is a wonderful idea. And if you're aware of our Vote for Features section within our Customer Success Center, then I strongly suggest that you put that in there. I think that would be a huge asset to the platform. And Elahe, if you wouldn't mind just sending them the link.
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now let's go into our initial project considerations. So number one, what devices will the end users have access to? The reason that this is important is depending on if the users are going to have access to iOS devices or Android devices may impact how you build your form. There are some functionalities that are only on iOS and some functionalities that are only on Android. So it's important to look into those, and in a couple seconds or minutes, I'll be going through a slide that has the link to see what the differences are within those two platforms. So that's important to consider, especially if your user base is going to be a mixture of Android and iOS devices, how to make a universal form that will capture the data that you're looking for. There aren't too many differences, but it is important to know what those are. The next initial project consideration is, what naming convention do I use for this form and this option list? So the same way that I mentioned to use a naming convention for your user group, it's also important to use it for how your forms are being named, or the table name that you're creating, just so that there is some consistency within your form building account, but also to be able to identify which forms go together. And in just a second, I'll show you a screenshot of what my dedicated database looks, or what my form builder homepage looks like, and how the naming convention can be of assistance. The second or third thing here, I should say, is how should I structure the form? Are there going to be subforms? Where can I split my form into different subforms? So how to make the user experience as smooth as possible with using subforms, and how subforms can really help by breaking up the data entry process and splitting it up into different topics. Another project consideration is, what element input type do you use for each question to then get the best result? And again, I keep saying in a few minutes, but truly in a few minutes, I'll be showing you a list of all the different element input types that are available within iFormBuilder, so that you can capture the best type of data. The last thing here is, one of the best things I believe that you can do within your project is using a form with smart controls. So the smart controls, it's basic JavaScript, and if you hear the word JavaScript and you're like, oh no, I don't know how to do that, we have such a huge library of how-tos on how to add smart controls to your forms, just to cut down on that human error, human input, and the data cleansing process. So the form building best practices, this is where I mentioned to you that you'll want to use a naming convention. And let me go ahead and have this example on one side, and then go into my form builder so you can see it in action. So for this example, I suggest that you use the parent form name, so that's that top level form. You use that as the table name, and then _P to symbolize that that's that top layer. Every time you were to add a subform attached to that parent form, always start with the same parent form name, and then change. You can also include the subform name details, and then change it to _C, symbolizing that that's a child or that's a subform. To do this, it's in the Edit Form Properties page. You'd be able to edit the table name. The form label can still be whatever you want it to be for your users when they're looking on their device. But this table name is specifically helpful to have the naming convention for organizing your form builder account, but also when you're assigning forms, it's easy to see which forms are connected. So if I go under my form builder, and just give it a second to load, you'll notice that all of these are starting with the same and then ending with either P or C, symbolizing if they're a child form or subform, as well as if they're a database form. So that's actually using our lookup table, which is using our smart table search, which is really, really powerful as well. And if I were to go into one of these, let's go into my subform. If I go to load form and I go to edit form properties, you'll see this section that says based on label. You'll uncheck this section to update your table name so that it follows your naming convention, but your form label, again, is user friendly and what the user is going to see on their device. Continuing on, these are not only is it important to build for the device type, which we mentioned, and here's that link I told you about, but also make sure that you build for the smallest device type and you test on the smallest device. So if your users are going to be capturing data on an iPhone, let's say, and you're testing on an iPad, if you're using our select option list or some of our toggle that actually contains what the user can, how much text the user can see, then it might look beautiful on your iPad, but once you go to that iPhone, it could be crunched up and you may not see all the text that's being required of the user or in that question. So it's important that you go through there and you test on the smallest device type so that you see exactly what the user is going to see. So some of our form building best practices here is have a device handy while building your forms. Open multiple browser windows for convenience. That's really important if you are going to be using the smart controls or the smart table search. I always add the required fields once a form is complete. That's more of a preference than actually a best practice. The reason I do that is because I like to then do some dummy data without having to complete the whole form to view that dummy data. Another reminder is when you are the form builder, I didn't mention this yet, so actually I'm glad I have this listed here. When you are the form builder, every single form that you create is going to be assigned to you. That being said, when that occurs, you may not want to have view of all those subforms that you've created on your device. So the same way that you assign a form to a user, you can go in and unassign all the subforms from your view as well. And only the parent form needs to be assigned to, if you've created a form group, or to the users. Only that parent form needs to be assigned because all the subforms will come with it. And next best practice here is to limit how many elements are on the parent form. Instead of having 100 different questions on one layer of a form like that parent form, it's much better to have 100 questions split up into different subforms. The reason being, it's a faster upload and download of the data. And the next piece here is that form building golden rules. Ella, hey, before I go into this, are there any questions?
It'd be helpful to unmute myself. We had one about having different versions of the same, or of subforms, but I just asked for clarification there. But if you want to go into detail about the question.
Having different versions of the subform. So I'm guessing, you've created a parent form and you've then added the subform, but then the subform has changed, and so you created a duplicate maybe. If that is the case, then you'd have to go back into that parent form and select what form is then being connected through the subform. What will affect that, though, is if you change that subform, if you have collected data previously, then if it's not the exact same table names, you may lose data that was previously collected. So this is where our form building golden rules, where you want to disable an element instead of replacing it, would make sense.
Okay, so then if you wanted to include a version, the parent wanted to include a new version, then duplicating it's the best way?
I would duplicate it, or I would, and then I would disable that field from the parent form and add a new field for that new subform. But the other thing is you can edit a live form. So you can edit that subform if it's just one or two changes and you don't want to have another version that you've created, then you can make those changes following our form building golden practices, or golden rules, of course. Make those changes, and then the next time the user syncs their device, they would see those changes on their form.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're getting close to the end here, so just bear with me, everybody. The next thing that I want to just cover here is the golden rules. So make sure you test before you go live. I think that one's pretty obvious. You don't want to have your users trying to collect data on a form that doesn't work. The next thing is to make sure you're using unique data column names that are database friendly. So when you have some time and you download our slide deck, be sure to click on this link, because this will show you all the terms of words that cannot be used as a data column name, which in this little screenshot you can see you can edit that data column name by unchecking where it says based on label. One thing I do want to point out here is if you do receive an error message saying a data column name is not allowed, you actually need to refresh your whole form builder window to make a change. So make sure you always refresh once you've received that error message. The third thing here is do not change the input type, the data size, or encryption of an element on a live form because it will delete the data. So this is something where if you go into your form builder, and let me just go back to my form builder homepage. If I select one of these forms, and just go here, if I maybe I notice that I've used a select option list for this specific field, and now I want to use a different kind of option list, but I've already collected data. So what I do is I can duplicate that input. So now I have that question listed twice. The original field, I then go into my input properties and I disable that. So now that field will no longer be downloaded to the user's device, but it's going to hold on to the data that it was previously collected. So then I would go into that second field, the one that I duplicated. I would select the other kind of option list that I wanted. So here I now want it as a pick list. I can change the label so that it removes the one, but the data column name has to be unique. So I'll keep that one there. I'll save my form, and now I've been able to edit a live form without impacting any of the data that I had previously collected. We also have option list golden rules, and these are the steps on how to edit a live option list without it affecting the data that was previously collected as well. So it's important to understand how option lists work and the data. If you're looking at a data view, then you'll always see the label when you're for the data of an option list. But if you're looking at any of the feeds, you may see that what we call the index value, which is that left-hand column with the numbers, or the key value. The key value, if you have a longer word, you'll have the underscore in between each word. And depending on that will depend on how you set up your form building and if you use some of our iFormBuilder built-in functions to display, if you want to force the label to be displayed in a feed, or if you want to force the key value to be displayed in a feed. But what I want to point out here is if you want to remove one of these options, you don't want to delete it because it will change the index value. So in the condition value for that field that you'd want to remove, you can just place false, and that will hide that. And underneath the field that you just removed and the ones that you want to continue to show, all you do is type in true. Going forward, here's a list of all the different input types that we have within FormBuilder. So it's important that you understand that all of these exist. And if you don't know what some of these are, we do have write-ups on each one of these input types for you to learn more and learn when is the right time to use them. I strongly suggest, just take the time to learn about these because there's no reason to have a text area in which you're collecting the user's social security number when we already have an input type for that functionality. The next thing is to make sure that you're aware that you can create those more advanced forms. So you're able to add logic to forms to create custom workflows and, again, eliminate human error and user interaction. You're able to add smart controls. You're able to add locational widget smart controls, segmented option lists, use our iFormBuilder built-in functions, as well as the smart table search with the lookup table. Now, coming to a close here, I know we're going to be a few minutes late, and so I'm just thank you for taking your time out. I just want to talk about how to simplify account management through the data and how to save your time through that. And the first thing is make sure that you understand the different data exports we have available to you. Also, that you can assign records back to a user if they need to make changes, or you can make those changes on the data views as well in the list view. If you're going to, if you want all your data in one location, you can actually upload CSV files of data that you maybe had previously collected in another tool so you can have all of that data in one database. The other thing you can do is if you're going to use our smart table search and our lookup table functionality, then you can upload CSV files for that data from that other database. Within the data tab, you can also edit and duplicate records. You can use our form stored filters, which is one of our newer functionalities, and you can edit data with the table edit view, which is really unique and makes it much easier instead of going into each individual record to make an edit to multiple records and fields. You also want to make sure that when you are thinking about the data, that you define your data workflow. So do you want to keep everything within the iFormBuilder database? Or do you want the data to leave iFormBuilder and go to another location? And as well as, do you want another tool to be importing data in iFormBuilder, maybe for a new user, or like creating a new user, or editing option lists? Define how you want that workflow to go. This is a just quick overview on the different data views and the data feeds. All of these links are clickable, so if you want to check those out later. Here's that stored filter that I mentioned to you, which is a newer functionality that we have, which allows you to create a filter kind of the same way that you're able to in Excel. You're able to create a rule and then only display the data that goes along with that rule that you've created. Once you've created a rule or created a stored filter, you can then go into the table edit view and edit all those records in one go instead of having to go and select each individual record and make the changes there. Nearing the end here, just how to get the most out of your data. So a lot of groups that start with FormBuilder, they'll start by just downloading the Excel view or downloading the Excel feed. Well, we try to push you not to just stay in that box. Think about using our post URL to have your workflow automated, and as well as using the iFormBuilder API to also really build a custom web service or custom connection to make your life a lot easier, so you're not having to go into iFormBuilder to download the Excel file. Just some information on our newest API, which is API 6.0, which enables you to submit the API request, which you specify the fields that will be included in the API response. So previously with our API, we didn't allow you to specify the fields, and that's where our API 6.0 is really, really valuable. One thing I want to point out here is if you're hearing me say API and you have no idea what I'm referring to, that is a way to automate your system. It's for developers. It's a way to connect systems together. So maybe you have an internal MySQL database and you want iFormBuilder data to go there as well as for data to go into iFormBuilder. That's really where you'll use this API. Here are some links about our API if you want to share those. And just to close here on how to increase productivity, make sure you use our support tools, you follow our iFormBuilder release notes, that you build upon your data and build a data integration in a workflow, create your custom workflow. Make sure you're aware of the different training options we have available to you and your team, and how to use those resources if you plan on creating your own training. The documentation that we have available can also increase your productivity. Creating naming conventions, as you see, can be hugely powerful. And the last thing that I have listed here to increase productivity is I strongly suggest that you have a form that is assigned to all your users, and it's called like Getting Started or How to Use iForm. And with that, it'll give them just the steps on using the iForm application. It could also include screenshots of those record status icons that we talked about earlier. It can include steps on how to troubleshoot, and it can be project specific to what you're working on, but it can also include an area where the user is able to submit a request or submit a change in the form. So that's a great way to add a communication between the person who's actually building the forms and the people who are using the forms. And These are just the different support options we have available to you. So some of these things I mentioned to you, make sure you're following our release notes. When you download this slide deck, you'll be able to click on each one of these to make sure that you are following suit and are aware of on how to use these. The two that I want to point out right now is we do have iFormBuilder certification, and that has been hugely successful this year. And if you are trying to get people up to speed on using iFormBuilder, or you yourself are trying to get up to speed, I strongly suggest that you sign up for one of our iFormBuilder certification courses. Not only does it go through form building, but some of this other management side with the forms that we've talked briefly about today. Another thing is to download our iFormBuilder ebook, which Elahe, if you want to talk briefly about that, and then I'll bring up our last slide.
Sure thing. So pretty soon we'll be having an ebook coming out that is dedicated for project managers. So going over a lot of what Barrett shared today, as well as some other things. So keep an eye out for that on the ebooks page, and I'm sure emails will also be coming out about it.
So have a wonderful day, and we truly appreciate the time that you've taken out and your responses so that we can make iFormBuilder the best around, I guess. Have a good rest of your day.